All right, Dad. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, and we have to talk about this pager attack. So let's just start by you telling us what you know so far. This pagers exploded all over Southern Lebanon. These Hezbollah members had them. Just can you tell us what happened, what you know so far?
Okay, yeah. The last I heard, the explosions left 11 dead. That's a figure that'll probably continue to climb, and approximately 3,000 injured. Um, yeah, many of the victims were members of Hezbollah. Not all of them were. There were two children among the dead. They may have been family members of Hezbollah. Now, it's important to remember that Hezbollah is not just a military organization; it's a civilian organization. Like Hamas is. So when you're saying you're killing, or targeting Hezbollah members, you could be military commanders, but then it can just be. It certainly could be civilians, and there's certainly many civilians among the victims. I don't know what the proportion is exactly. But it was widespread. We're talking over 3,000 people injured. It, it's it was said, I don't know, on what this is based, but that there were 5,000 of these pagers. Initially the thought was that maybe that something was done to make the battery explode. But then later reports came in and made clear that that just wasn't possible, especially with this model, that some sort of explosive had been implanted. And then the question is, where was this explosive embedded in the device? One report claimed that it was in the production phase, and then others suggested that it was somewhere in the shipment process. So that's just not clear at this point. The company that makes these pagers is a Taiwanese company, but everyone seems to agree that actually this batch was produced in Europe by a factory in Europe. So either almost certainly it was Mossad that was behind this. So Mossad either had the explosive embedded somewhere in the production process in Europe, or somehow managed to waylay, we'll say, the shipment and embed the process and then continue. It seems like either way, whether it happened during shipment or production, there had to be some sort of inside cooperation. I don't see how otherwise how it would be possible. So this actually, again, this is a major blow to Hezbollah. Many of their people were injured, along with many other, Lebanese. It certainly disrupted their communication systems, at least in the short run. I think they probably have backups. It's interesting that they use pagers, but it's not because they're poor and they can't afford cell phones or anything like that. But I think they found that pagers actually are more resistant to, disruption by Israeli electronic warfare, and just let the Israelis find it more difficult to disrupt this pager-based communication system. Apparently, there was a similar attack attempted, actually not against Hezbollah, but against Hamas in 2009. But Hamas detected, noticed that there was something wrong with the devices and raised the alarm before anything could happen. I've seen that reported in at least a couple of places. Now this raises all kinds of issues. Of course it's hardly what you would call a targeted assassination. It was widespread. It killed all kinds of people. Hamas military, but not Hamas, but rather Hezbollah military, but also many other civilians, both Hezbollah and non-Hezbollah, children and adults. It did severely injure actually the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon. I think that he's going to lose sight in one eye, at the very least. There was I saw one report that said that actually shortly before the explosion occurred, the pager beeped, and that was which caused many people to raise the pager, up to their face, and that increased the severity of the injuries. Now, that hasn't been confirmed, but I saw that in one place. It's certainly possible. Well, again, this raises a lot of issues. Was this something this something that was scheduled? If it was, like they intended for this to happen yesterday, when it did happen, then that suggests that an invasion by Israel is imminent, because it's not unusual to attack, an enemy's communication system, prior to an all-out invasion. I remember the U.S. doing that in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They would first take out all these communication towers, relay towers, and so forth, try to utterly destroy the enemy's communication system before launching the greater attack. But there is another story out there that say that, well, that's not the case. Actually, this was the Israelis were forced to do this prematurely. They were planning to do this actually during the course of a war. You can see how devastating it could be right in the midst of a war. But they somehow got news that some Hezbollah members had noticed that something was fishy. And so the alarm was about to be raised. And so they immediately sent out the signal to cause the explosions. And they did it earlier than they wanted to do it. So, hopefully we'll get some clarity on that. But those are the two possibilities. Now, there's this question also, was there U.S. involvement or Western involvement, and at least Western foreknowledge of this? I saw that, I don't know, how important this is, but that, apparently is some sort of electronic warfare aircraft. One actually belonged to the U.S., another belonged to the U.K., were observed right off the coast of Lebanon shortly before this happened. Now, I don't know if that really has anything to do with it. I don't really see the connection there, but some people say that there's possibly a connection. But something that's a little bit more suspicious in my mind anyway, doesn't prove anything, but you have to say it's suspicious. It's just 10 days ago, American University asked their staff to turn in their pagers to get replaced by new pagers. And so some people are
in Beirut.
Yeah, in Beirut.
Okay.
Right. Now, these kind of things happen. They said I read the message they sent out and said that, we're improving our system and upgrading it. And, so we want you to, right, in the next few days, turn in your pager. And maybe that's all it was. It could be completely innocent. But you just have to wonder,
Right. But why do university professors in Beirut even have pagers? I mean, who's using pagers?
They did. Yeah, they did. I don't know why.
The last time I saw pagers was yours when I was like 8 years old.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had one like a good 25 years ago, right?
Right. So is this, you I think are classifying this attack as kind of almost state-sponsored terrorism, that it was kind of widespread, it was...
Yeah, well,
is that fair to say?
I mean, it's kind of par for the course for Israel. I mean, the truth is, like, if you look at a lot of the operations, I don't think it was actually probably less inhumane or less barbaric than much of what we've seen in Gaza. Many of those attacks deliberately target civilians. I don't think this was deliberately targeting civilians. They were more interested in getting Hezbollah, and they did get a fair number of them. It's just that there was a lot of collateral damage. That's a euphemism for, the killing and maiming of civilians, and that they knew that was going to happen. But Israel has never shown any concern for that. I mean,
right. Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction when I saw this was, I saw the videos of it, people in grocery stores shopping and people driving their cars, and you're like, my God. And I immediately jumped to, this is Israel going overboard, that they have no regard for life because of what we've seen them do in Gaza. But then I tried to take a step back and look at it like, okay, let me try to remove myself from everything that's happening in Gaza,
Hmm.
what I've seen, because it gives me, I have these emotional responses to whatever Israel does. I just immediately
Hmm.
think that everything's wrong. But then I'm like, well, in a sense, it actually is quite surgical that these were given to Hezbollah members only. And if they are in a war with Hezbollah, is this a legitimate attack? So I don't know where I
Yeah,
stand fully on
right.
this.
Yeah,
Like
right. It's
I
not. Yeah, you can't describe it as surgical or, um, but yeah, compared to so much of what I think that the target was Hezbollah, and in particular the military commanders. But they did it knowing that they were going to kill a lot of civilians in the
right,
process.
but
Again, it's like Edward Snowden pointed out. Look, people are driving cars when this happens. Whatever. It's not like. When they pressed the button, they knew there would be hundreds and hundreds of civilians, if not thousands of civilian injuries, and we know of at least a couple, children that were killed.
hmm Right. Yeah, I understand that, but at the same time, you said earlier that Hezbollah is not an official army or fighting force. It's a civilian
It's both. It's
militia. It's
both.
right.
Right.
It's right, which gives it this gray area. Then, like, well, how are you supposed to combat this type of thing if they are part of their communities? They are part.
Hmm.
So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. If I was from the Israeli point of view, at least I was afraid of them carpet bombing Beirut or
Yeah. Well, they
Houthi,
may
which they
do
may
that.
still do it. They may
Yeah.
still
Well, the
do
thing
it.
is, they've done things like that in the past in Lebanon, and so yeah. I mean, this is horrific, but it's really no more horrific than things that Israel has done, and it's probably less horrific and has less military or more military justification than a lot of previous operations in Lebanon, and
Right.
certainly in Gaza, without
Right,
question, in
exactly.
Gaza.
That's the way I'm looking.
Right.
I see it.
Right.
I mean,
I
I'm
have
like,
to
well, at
say that.
least they are target. These were pagers that they know were being used for communications amongst Hezbollah members. And so in that sense, it was quite targeted. Obviously,
Uh-huh.
that these people are going about the city with their families and whatever. So, that's horrific. But then, if you are from the Israeli point of view, they're thinking, well, we got to take out Hezbollah. In that
Hmm.
sense, it was actually rather ingenious.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't
No.
like giving the Israeli credit, but
Yeah.
I feel like
Right.
I'm going to be
Yeah.
impartial and
No,
look
no,
at.
I agree. This is not something I don't think consider this like some people have tried to paint it as particularly barbaric, but again, compared to so much, it's just not barbaric compared to what we've seen in Gaza, which clearly is just genocidal. I mean, just going after civilians, destroying their hospitals, and killing them in Israeli declared safe zones, and
Right.
right, we've seen that. Or you just take the example of that hostage rescue. What they rescue a handful of hostages and kill a couple hundred Palestinian civilians in the process. I mean, when you compare it to this is sort of like everyday life in Gaza, and then this actually made some military sense. It was cruel. We couldn't call it surgical. It clearly involved a lot of civilian casualties, but you have to say it is the kind of thing that happens in war.
Hmm.
I can't think of anything like similar that the Russians have done. There's if they did, I think there would be a huge hue and cry about it, even if it did clearly have a military target. And I don't think the Russians would, but this is sort of like within a gray area of what sort of things that happen in the war. And I think the U.S. has done similar things in the past.
Right. Yeah. The other thing you were mentioning was just saying that this maybe set off a little prematurely. That there were two theories: that one, you would knock out the communications first and go in for invasion, or rather that they were hoping to wait one after the invasion happened and then do this and cause chaos during the middle of the conflict,
Right.
and give Israel the upper hand. Now that they've done this, do you believe that the invasion is imminent? They like, okay, we've done this. Their communications are knocked out. Now is the time to roll into southern Lebanon.
It does appear to be imminent. It seemed like it was rather imminent even a couple months ago, but I mean,
I
we're
know.
getting more. It's like a greater frequency of like, yeah, this is what we're doing. I think even Gallant, right, who's maybe on the chopping block, as you brought up in the last program, right?
Yeah, he's still around, I guess, right?
He's still around, but he's actually saying, yeah, no, we're shifting from Gaza to Lebanon, and it's just if this rhetoric, the words that we're hearing from Netanyahu and other top leaders mean anything, and I think they do. There is going to be some sort of major attack on Lebanon in the very near future.
Right. I mean,
Um,
they need to do it fast, right? Because it
yeah.
won't take long for them to recuperate. They'll get another communication system in place rapidly.
Uh-huh.
So if they want to take advantage of the chaos, you
It's
only
yeah.
have
Well, quite
maybe
possibly. That's
48
what.
hours, right? I mean,
Right. That seems
I
that
was guessing.
seems that seems like a good guess. Um, yeah. I'd also say about this. This does okay. You can say this was a cruel, a ruthless but effective attack and ingenious attack
Mhm.
by the Israelis. But it does have, I think, potentially a big downside. And one is, well, just the fact they used a civilian um, electronics company to do this. First of all, raises some huge liability issues. I mean, quite seriously, you say this product was used to kill, a dozen people and injure thousands. There's got to be some enormous liability there. And I think inevitably, if it goes to the courts, I don't know where it would. Maybe it could, be in Europe. The fingers get pointed at Mossad and Israel in general. And again, it's, they'll never pay the price, but it does again shine a light on them. Um, and but I think secondly, as I think it was Craig Murray pointed out, said this could have potentially really have a negative impact on Israeli manufacturers. He's just
Mm.
thinking that okay, this was in fact a Taiwanese company, right? But it's just like it's going to be hard to sell Israeli electronic devices, and
Yeah,
people are
right
just
now
going
I'm
to
not
wonder.
using them.
Yeah, right. Well, there was already an issue. I mean, I've heard this going years back about Israeli software, like that they
Malware,
always
right?
had. Right, they always have a
Trojans
backdoor in
and
there. They use it. There's use it to collect information on U.S. citizens, and so that was already there. But this is just it just has to create a lot of paranoia, right, about anything that's made in Israel. Because they say, well, is the Mossad involved in this? This, or any company that has some sort of association with Israel, or what? It's
hmm
just going to. Potentially, in the long run, it could actually be very damaging to Israel.
Right. I mean, how we're even recording this thing right now, I was using Spotify podcasters, and I think they switched over to using this third party Riverside, which saw later on that is based in Tel Aviv. And I'm like, uh-oh. Do we need to switch to something else for our podcast now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not completely. It's been shown that their software companies have done this. It's kind of it's a well known fact.
Okay, well, we'll
That,
talk
yeah.
about that
Yeah.
after this
Okay.
this episode. See what we need to do. Well, what is Hezbollah's response been to this so far? Have they promised some type of retribution?
Yes, they have. That's as far as I know, that's what they've said. There will be retaliation for it, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, great. So we got
Yeah.
another one. So
And
this is imploding. This situation in the Middle East is on a collision course right now. I mean, there's no. We have the Iran retaliation. We have things escalating
right.
in
And
Southern
again, the
Lebanon.
Iranian ambassador was very severely injured. They say can describe him as critically injured. I guess he could even die. So Iran also suffered in this attack.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's going to pop off. Who once it goes, we can't really make any predictions. But I imagine there will be some type of coordinated rocket attack from Hezbollah, potentially the Houthis as well.
Mhm.
Maybe we can actually segue back over to the Houthis because I was just thinking a little bit more about the missile strike that the Houthis launched on Israel. First of all, is there any up? Do you have any new information about that attack? Is there?
Yeah, all I know is that, okay, at least I've heard that it was an Iranian missile modified by the Houthis. And now I don't know if it was truly hypersonic, but it could be. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about Iran and hypersonic capabilities. It's believed by many that they do have hypersonic missiles. So it's possible they had one and gave one to the Houthis. Again, you have Israel denied that anything happened, but I think even the Israelis are suspicious. They don't believe that there wasn't any damage. And apparently, it did hit a facility. It may have been again, the video I saw, it looked like it was an oil refinery or something like that.
Right.
But
But then, yeah, you also said the possibility of this, what, 8,200
yeah,
facility.
that is actually in reference to the earlier Hezbollah attack. Remember, there was a couple of weeks ago they launched a barrage of rockets,
Oh,
and
so that wasn't the Houthi strike?
yeah, there may be some people saying that this hit 8,200, but um, it was definitely suspected, and I believe that actually Hezbollah claimed to have hit it during that attack. The Israelis denied it entirely, and just clamped down. As it's just shown, refused to release any photos or anything. But there was some reports leaked from Europe. I guess European intelligence is at least a story that actually that attack had done severe damage to Unit 8200. And that several people died and dozens were injured. And if so, that would really be a major blow. It just,
Right. And just for people that didn't listen to the last episode, Unit 8200 is the equivalent, you said, of essentially the NSA in the United
right,
States, right?
right.
So a big intelligence facility. Yeah, I think we shouldn't be overlooked just sort of the significance of this Houthi strike. We can argue whether or not it was hypersonic. I don't think that is really relevant because the fact of the matter is that it circumvented not only all of Israel's air defenses, which the Iron Dome, David Sling, or
Yeah. I
Arrow
guess the
2.
Israeli
Right.
story is okay, like the official is that it did actually, several missiles were fired at it, Iron Dome, David Singh, and they missed. And finally one hit it, but it only partially, it didn't completely destroy it. So even in the Israeli version, you'd have to say it was a rather successful strike. A single missile from Yemen traveled 1,000 miles and clearly did penetrate their air defense. And
Right. I mean, well, not only Israel's air defense, but the United States has their navy around Israel as
right, it
well.
actually right. They say
And the
so. The
reason that
path of the missile went right over the U.S. Navy.
right, and the reason that the navy is there is to provide air defense. And so we have one single missile. You got the whole of a big portion of the United States Navy there. And you got all the best air defense systems in the world, supposedly.
Supposedly, not
So, I mean, it seems clear that actually Russia has, but it's often argued that Israel has the most advanced air defense systems. Obviously, they put a lot into it. And
right.
one missile from the Houthis, one of the poorest countries in the planet, was able to send a single missile and it went past all of them. I think that it just really hammers home what we've talked about before, that we are at a new age of warfare, and that really missiles and air defenses are really the game changers. And drones. People kind of talk about how much money we spend on our military. We've talked about this many times. We talk about, look at all of our fancy tanks and our all of our naval vessels. We got all these aircraft carriers. That doesn't really mean much anymore. It doesn't mean like, what can they do? Great, you can roll your tanks around and then have it get blown up by a $500 drone, or you spend all this money on these super air defenses, but if you have hypersonic missiles, it doesn't matter. It's worthless. So the playing field has been leveled, and what we've seen just, I think, showing that the Houthis is that you can have, like we said, one of the poorest countries in the planet, some of the poorest people are now able to inflict damage on the most powerful military nations in the world. The U.S. Israel military.
Right. Well, it's almost like again that their poverty gives them a leg up, because the U.S. I mean, it's got a lot of firepower and it can blow up a lot of buildings, a lot of infrastructure. But if you really don't have any, or so you can't say they don't have any, but they don't have much. They just don't have much in the way of infrastructure and then buildings, and so the U.S. quickly ran out of targets. There just weren't things that they could blow up, and in the meantime, the Houthis just continued with their attack on Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea. They had their drones and their missiles in caves and in tunnels, and the U.S. really couldn't do anything about it. It's just like if you have a lot to lose, They say, well, okay, the U.S. can blow up your city. That's pretty bad. We don't want that to happen. That's quite a threat. And uh, the Houthis in northern Yemen don't really even have a city to speak of. So it's just like, okay.
Right, right. It's true when you have nothing to lose, and it's kind of you're unburdened.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that there's a possibility that you said that this missile was applied by the Iranians? I don't know if there's any way to verify that, but do you think it's also possible that a user asked this that perhaps that this was a Russian missile and used as kind of a warning to the West,
Yeah.
saying that hey, you're talking about sending in long range missiles into Russia. Well, we can show you like what we're able to do. If you do that, we can give the Houthis these hypersonic missiles, and they can, strike U.S. naval vessels, strike
Yeah. Well,
Israel.
I think that is possible. That is possible. I think it's a
Well,
reasonable hypothesis.
another thing that makes me think that maybe potentially that there is some Russian involvement in this is how would the Houthis even get the coordinates to strike this target? Because we talked about, we the U.S. and the U.K. want to give long range missiles to Ukraine, and Putin made it very clear, like, well, you can't do that because it requires
Hmm.
U.S. technicians to input the data to do the targeting using their satellites. Well, okay, Yemen doesn't have any satellites. They don't
Right.
have any
Right.
technicians. They don't have the technical capability to do this. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, if Ukraine doesn't, which means that they have to be this missile had to be input get data from some other source, and if it requires satellite data, it has to be. Iran doesn't have satellites, right? I mean,
I'm not sure. I mean, of course, Iran has quite an arsenal of missiles, and they can fire them with great accuracy. I'm not sure, exactly what data they're using. If they, um,
yeah, that's something that's I haven't really heard discussed.
that's
What do
just
they
that's
use?
yeah, that's a good question. Um, I know that like it was recently, uh, yeah, recently I did see that. Um, let's say there's a suspicion, or maybe more than a suspicion, presumption that in the recent talks between Russia and Iran, and the probable supplying of EW and like S-300, not S-300, but I think S-400 systems to Iran, that necessarily the Russians would also be supplying or giving them access to Russian satellite data to the Glasnost
Mm,
system. Um, so certainly some of they must be relying or getting help from the Russians for some things. I don't know if they actually do have a satellite of their own, or if there are different kinds of guidance systems. There are GPS guided, and then there are also systems that actually rely on an internal map. That it's the missile has a camera, and it can actually locate itself on a map that it's carrying with itself, and so that I don't know if they have that. I mean, I know some U.S. systems do, and like for example, we're talking about the JSAM. I think that has that ability. Well, no, I think even the Storm Shadow does. So if the GPS gets hacked, it switches, which it does regularly in Ukraine and Russia. They can switch over to the map system. Now, I don't know. The Russians must have some way of dealing with that too, because again, the Storm Shadow has not been very effective at all, but it is probably a little bit more difficult to hack. And I don't know if the Iranians have something similar, or it's even possible for them to. So this is just speculation. This is something for us to look into.
right. Well, if there is a suspicion that if you do need satellite data and if light comes from the Russians, I feel that the U.S. media and Western media would jump to that. Go all over because they want to lump Iran and Russia together to make these excuses. I mean, really, I think we saw this story seeded before this whole long range missile crisis was happening.
Hmm.
With that Iran is supplying Russia with missiles. And I think that story was being seeded into the Western, mainstream media as a justification for the
Yeah, I think
West.
so.
So they all clearly are trying to tie those two together to get to say that we can do this or do that. So I'm surprised that they're not saying that Russia is providing satellite data. If we're able to think that it's a possibility, that
Uh-huh.
the State Department isn't making these claims like, oh,
Right.
Russia
Yeah. Well, it
is
may be,
supplying
who knows
terrorists
what's
in the
going on.
Middle East or
Again,
whatever.
right. Again, it's clear that the Defense Department in the U.S. does not want to see these long range missile strikes into Russia. It seems that they take the Russian threats quite seriously. And if, in fact, again, pure speculation, but if, in fact, like this was either a Russian missile or a missile that was operated using Russian supplied data, probably the Russians, if they did it, it was, like you say, to kind of fire a warning shot across the bow, right? And they would make sure that the U.S. Defense Department understood this, and maybe they did. They saw it, and it's just something that they're going to use to actually strengthen their position, their argument. Hey, look, they're for real. This threat is real. Let's not go ahead with this long range missile strike plan. So it could be, it's not, then maybe they don't want to play it up, because they see this is a real threat. I don't think the U.S. wants to go ahead and say like, oh yeah, we're actually kind of scared of the Russians, the retaliation. They never want to admit any sort of weakness, but amongst themselves, they recognize the threat when they see it, and who knows what's going behind the scenes. But if in fact Russia was involved in this, it may be that they don't want to play it up, but they just want to use it to press home the point that, hey, they're serious and we shouldn't do this.
Yeah, I mean, seems like there hasn't been much talk about this whole Houthi missile strike in general in the West. Is that true? Have you noticed that? Like, I haven't really been seeing
Yeah.
much.
No, it hasn't
I think it's quite significant.
Right.
This potentially a hypersonic missile, and
Right.
nobody's really talking about it in
Right.
Western media that much. I mean,
Right.
not
Well,
that
there
I've
was
seen.
that Houthi drone attack, right, from like a month or two ago
That hit Tel
hit,
Aviv.
hit Tel Aviv, and that got a lot of play, but this one isn't. And yeah, that could be meaningful. It could be that.
That means it might be real. That
Yeah,
it's they don't
maybe.
want it.
Yeah,
It is a
that time
hypersonic missile.
they retaliated in a big way. I know that like Netanyahu has threatened to retaliate for this and make them pay, but we'll see what happens.
This thing really is just about to explode, and then who knows?
Oh yeah, no, it's very, very dangerous.
Okay, well, we were talking a little bit of just with these long range missiles. Maybe we can stay on that for a second. Has there been any update on the Ukraine Russia front in terms of approving long range missile strikes into Russia via Ukraine?
No. Okay, it's for the time being, the U.S. has said essentially that they haven't decided, and they won't they're not giving the approval. They haven't so far, but they said that they're willing to listen to Zelensky. Zelensky is going to go to New York actually to I think speak at a session of the UN, and he's going to present I don't know, publicly or privately while he's there, his so-called victory plan. And he said, well, like, when you see my victory plan, you're sure to do this. Part of his victory plan is that he gets permission to make these long range strikes. It's just more PR from Zelensky, and it's in the end, the U.S. either they'll hold the line, that this time finally, that they've just said, okay, we've escalated as far as we can go, and it's time to stop, or they'll just continue up the escalation ladder. We'll find out.
Your money.
Well, based on what we've seen so far, it's just like the U.S. never seems to hold the line, and Zelensky always seems to get his way eventually. I mean, that's why he just makes such an ass of himself, because he just finds that if he keeps on complaining, he gets what he wants, right? But I've also felt like there is a line that the U.S. will not cross, and maybe this is it. I'll say just I know that this seems like I'm supposed to tell you exactly what the future is going to be, but I don't know. It seems like 50-50 could go either way on this one. I'm just hoping that the Defense Department, the realists there, hold the line and they win the day on this one. Again,
Well,
it just seems like the other side really uh, doesn't have any justification. I mean, it's just they don't really have an argument. Is it this, like the Defense Department is pointing out, that this really would do very little. It's not going to affect the outcome of the war, but it does it at great risk. So why? I mean,
mhm.
the benefits are nearly nil, but the costs are potentially huge. So why go down this road? It
Well, the
just seems like they
benefits
have.
are actually negative, I would say. I mean, I think the
Well, I
argument
mean,
that's
you can say that maybe you could hit, like the the actually the Ukrainians did hit a major military depot, I think, last night.
no, I did see that, right?
Yeah, maybe you could. So there's potentially some benefit, but it's just not going to change the outcome of the war. And the Russians are already anticipating the use of these missiles, and they've moved a lot of their air assets, out of reach of them. And that's what, like Lloyd Austin pointed out. So why? Why? It's just that you might do a little something, so you could have some benefit, but it's really very minor, and then the cost could be huge. This just doesn't make any. This do a basic cost benefit analysis. This does not make sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would still say that even if you hit some type of depot deep within Russia, it's still a net negative for the Ukrainians because just think about the response that's going to come from Russia, the rallying around the flag effect that you're going to have, and the more just sort of vindication for the Russians saying that, yeah, no, we really, well, the Russia's under attack by NATO, and we got to really stick together. I mean, the argument that I think Zelensky is making is that if we start doing these missile attacks to Russia, then people will
Hmm.
rise up against Putin.
Yeah.
It's going to have the opposite effect.
Right. That's what
You
they've been
know,
saying all along, and it has had. I mean, that's the thing. He's got to provide just a tiny bit of evidence that that's true, and it just has not been true. Every time, especially when they hit civilians, it just the Russian resolve strengthens, support for Putin strengthens. If he loses support, it's again on the nationalist side. You get people that are just frustrated with Putin for being cautious, and there's
mm,
just you do not strengthen. There's no a major peace faction in Russia to begin with. There's a very small one at this point. It used to be much larger, but it's been shrinking over time thanks to Zelensky's idiotic attacks on civilians. And
mm.
if further attacks that hit civilian infrastructure or kill civilians are just going to shrink that faction more. I mean, that's what's been happening. Is there any reason to think that it's going to turn around? And it's absurd.
Yeah,
They don't have an argument. They just don't. And anybody who's
yeah.
looking at rationally, it just shows how irrational are and kind of really dim-witted some of the Western leaders have become. I think it's
Right.
just they're so emotionally invested in this, and they just cannot admit to themselves that they made a huge mistake. Right? That's the thing. It's like the moment you say, yeah, this isn't working, it's just like the whole kind of fantasy, I think, begins to unravel. So you just have to, you can only explain it in sort of emotional terms. So they just have to keep on reinvesting. Otherwise, they're going to see what they've done.
Mm. Well, you said that Zelensky's in the U.S. going to lay out his war plan for victory, and which includes the long-range missiles. I mean, does he have any other argument that he could potentially make? Because the only one that I've heard is that will wreak havoc in deep in Mother Russia, and it'll cause people to
Yeah.
get really upset. Which is basically just an admission that yeah, we're this is that's terrorism, right? I mean
Right.
that you're
Yeah.
going to wreak the
Right.
so.
Yeah. And yeah,
Um,
most of these attacks, like the one on the military depot, was a legitimate military
mhm.
attack. But, the same night, a lot of these drones, like which happens day after day and, week after week, struck civilian targets, injured and killed civilians in different places in Russia. And that's just pure terrorism. And it happens all the time. And then the U.S., the Western powers are just not concerned.
Okay, well, are there any other updates we want to give on the Ukraine-Russian front?
Um, no, I'd say, I guess it's more of the same. The Russians continue to make steady progress in many places in the front, and it's again like if you look at a whole map of Ukraine, Ukraine's a very big country. You really won't see much going on. But if you compare it to what was happening, let's say even 3 months ago, and 3 months ago, the Russians were moving faster, quite a bit faster than they were, let's say, 6 months prior to that. There's a clear acceleration. I mean, they're taking, whereas before, you know, you take maybe 100 meters a day, take a tree line, and take another few houses, another street. They're taking whole neighborhoods. They're taking 10 square kilometers, in different places, and not just one place on the front. That's the difference. Now, it used to be like, there was just the Battle of Bakhmut. That was the one place where things were moving, right? And then there's Avdiivka, which I think is proved to be is that really was a turning point. But that was the one place where the Russians were making progress, and it was rather slow. I mean, that was just a highly fortified city. But now it's like there's 6, 7, 8 different places on the line where you'll see a significant advance, and day after day after day. There's a clear acceleration, a clear weakening of the lines. And it's for the reasons, that we said. It's just that the Ukrainians are weaker, the Russians are stronger, and the Russians have just pushed through all the main fortification lines, or they're pushing through the last of it now in places like Ugledar and Chasiv and then right outside of Pokransk, there's like one last fortification line just outside of Pokransk, and they're going to push through that soon. And then after that, once they get through these places, again, Vugledar, Chasiv Toretsk, and they're moving in all these fronts. Pokrovsk, there's just nothing. The Ukrainians haven't built anything, and again, like I was saying earlier, it's just the countryside there does not lend itself to the kind of fortifications that they built in the eastern Donbass. It's a different kind of country. They don't have the mines. They don't have the factories, prisons, the industrial structures that are very easy the high rises that are very easy to convert into fortresses. It's a much more open country and much less industrial. So I think they're going through those, they're going through the last of the fortifications now, and after that, I think we'll see clearly there will be a continued acceleration.
Okay. Yeah, you were kind of predicting a week ago or so that it was maybe about 2 months that you were saying approximately for them to kind of break through this, and then essentially it's going to be a collapse and an open roads for the Russians.
Yeah, it's a guess. But it just seems like I would still
on
say
that
it just
timeline?
seems like in the past you could see, okay, the Russians were really grinding down the Ukrainian forces, but the Ukrainians always had reserves, and they just like, okay, this brigade has been just totally torn apart, but they'll just move in a new brigade, and just that'll hold the line for another month or 2 months. And but they just don't have the reserves now. What's happening is they're just stripping them from one place to the other. I think they have put a lot into Pokrovsk because they realize how vital that is. But apparently they did that by stripping a lot of units from Zaporozhye and Kherson. And that raises, interesting. They've really, just thinned out their forces in those areas. The Russians may choose to move there. I mean, the Russians could, again, who knows what they're going to decide, but they very easily could launch a major offensive because they have the reserves. They have, like in Zaporozhye, 130,000 troops apparently that aren't really doing anything. And if they just may go forward, we'll see. They may choose not to do it now for whatever reason, but they have that capability. And there's sort of whenever they do manage, they'll throw in bodies to slow down the Russian advance one place. They just open up opportunities for the Russians in other places.
Okay, yeah, we'll see if Zelensky he's able to make his plea effectively, and see if he's able to get more NATO involvement, because that's really the danger that we're seeing here.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if there's any rationality to his plan, that's it. It's just that he's trying to trick NATO into a war. And there's, you got people like Stoltenberg, who's, is ending his term as Secretary General of NATO, saying that, it's just like, again, Putin's bluffing. He's bluffed before, we definitely ought to do this. And it just seems to me so terribly reckless. And you say,
Hmm.
well, like, if somebody is say, hey, I don't want you to do this, and you just keep on ignoring them, you say, well, you said that earlier, so let's just even do more. It's just there's
Everyone's
just no
bluffing
reason.
until
There's
they're
some
not.
point where he responds, and he's shown
Right,
that in the
right,
past they have responded. What is
right.
this war that's going on now? If not proof of that, it was
Hmm.
the Russians were raising the alarm going back, many years before this war, saying, how seriously they took Ukraine and how it was a red line for them. And we ignored that red line for years, but eventually, okay, the Russians did respond in a huge way. So again, this the Stoltenberg kind of comment, it just seems like absurdly or just wildly, insanely reckless.
I mean, these guys are, they're just playing a game, but this game involves the lives of every single person on this planet. When we're talking about nuclear armed powers, and yeah, it's just unbelievably reckless. There's no sanity, and then the problem is that these people are at the top, so there's nobody there to really check them. They kind of just they will get their way. This is how the power
Mhm.
structure works, and these people are on top, and Biden and Blinken really want to do it. Obviously there's some forces within the Pentagon that are pushing back, but
Yeah, yeah,
ultimately Biden's
yeah.
commander in
Interesting. In
chief, right?
Germany too. Like one thing that Olaf Scholz is, if you remember, it was maybe like a year ago or more that the pressure started to build on him to hand over Taurus missiles to the Ukrainians. And he actually drew the line on that. And here it is, better than a year later, and they still. So there are, I think it's important to see that maybe there really are some true red lines that some of these leaders won't. Olaf Scholz is famous for caving in on everything else, but he did not cave in on this. And I'm just hoping that we'll find the same thing in the Defense Department, for
Right,
very similar reasons.
right. What constitutes a long range missile? How far does it have to be able to go? Because we talked about the
Yeah.
Taurus and the Storm Shadow, and you were saying some of these have like, oh, wow, it has a range of like 300 kilometers or 500
Right.
kilometers. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, but the Houthis just shot a missile 1,600 kilometers. I mean, like,
Yeah.
this is
Right.
way that for me, that's long range. And I'm thinking,
Yeah. Right. Well,
300
I
isn't
mean,
that?
okay, we can say certainly something that can hit Moscow is long range. Now, the
How far
Storm
away is
Shadow,
Moscow from the Ukrainian border?
it is like I think the southeastern outskirts are about 300 kilometers from, the nearest point within Ukraine. So you could just barely, hit the outskirts of Moscow with an ATACMS. Again, I think that actually Moscow has been shown itself to be very well defended, very strong air defense. So, occasionally a drone gets there, but sometimes even like a dozen drones, they all get neutralized by their EW and air defense missiles. So, and again, they have shown that they've been able to actually pretty much neutralize the attackers. So I don't think it's much of a threat, but you never know. Occasionally, some missile gets through, and it could do some real damage. Um,
Oh,
your sister, by the way, is in southeastern Moscow, but she's not in the outskirts of southeastern Moscow.
totally move north.
Yeah, now the Taurus missile has a range of 500 kilometers. That really, I think that certainly deserves, and that's Schultz just seemed to have enough sense to say we just better not give this to
Hmm.
the Ukrainians. And he himself admitted that to fire this missile, to operate it, you needed German technicians.
But is
And
this the longest range missile that Germany has? The
it may be the
Taurus?
longest one they do have. The U.S. obviously has longer ones. I think they're Tomahawks, and that maybe are like the Houthi, maybe 1,000 kilometers or more.
Well, you
But
said the
nobody's
Houthi
talking about
one,
those. When partly
right?
because they're capable of delivering a nuclear payload. So it's
Yeah.
just like,
Well,
okay, this is off limits. Nobody, at least at this point, is talking about those.
I don't. It just puts things a bit into perspective for me when I'm hearing like the NATO weaponry talk about these fancy Storm Shadows and the Taurus, and then what I'm saying when I see the Yemenis with
Yeah,
their shooting
yeah.
their missiles, I'm like, well, wait, so why does Yemen have better missiles than all of NATO? I mean, is that
Yeah.
right? Is that
I
true?
don't know if they do, but it's, they're certainly effective enough, They
But
have gotten
apparently they have a missile that can go further than any missile that France has, any missile that the UK has, any missile
yeah.
that Germany has, right?
Well, that I'm aware of. Yeah. I mean,
Well,
they
that
probably.
should
I
kind
mean,
of.
well, there. Of course, there are going to be land-based missiles that actually that are capable of carrying nuclear warheads in Germany and other parts of Europe, and that's something that that really raised a lot of alarms recently. They haven't been installed yet. I mean, they certainly could develop the capability. I mean, the U.S. has plenty of missiles like that.
You know what the longest range missile we have is? You said
Well, there's
Tomahawk.
certainly ICBMs, that can go many thousands of miles. They can cross oceans, cross continents, um,
Can
and
those
but
be
those,
shot down?
yeah, there's no reason why they can't be. That's
I just hope we never have to see these things
no,
launched. But I
no.
just feel like we're getting to that point where we need to discuss these things because the threat of nuclear annihilation is becoming more real.
Yeah, no, they're
Um,
certainly pushing closer and closer to it. And if they go ahead with this, these long range missile strikes, they've just taken another step in that direction. It'll fail because the thing is, it will fail. It doesn't solve their problem. And then there will be a push to go farther. I mean, that's what we've seen for the last 2.5 years. So there's no reason to think that process is going to stop. And if certain people don't develop a backbone within the Western establishment, the realists that are there, then we're in danger of just escalating right up to the threshold of nuclear weapons. We're not there yet, but we're headed in that direction.
do you feel like it's inevitable? Like, I was listening to Mearsheimer, and I have a great respect for Mearsheimer. It was him and Jeffrey Sachs, and Mearsheimer has this idea that there of this power game between great powers, that we have to contain a power like China, for example, because that inevitably, as they grow, there will lead to this clash, and we have to making the argument for the hegemon in a sense that we have to have this. It reminds me a bit about. I think you were reading that book, The Three Body Problem. I think you were reading it in Chinese.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the second book was The Dark Forest. They had this concept of why you don't notice any other alien life out there. It's because, well, if another alien life form on another planet has reached the capability to broadcast that it's out there, that any other advanced planet or civilization out there will immediately recognize that as a potential threat and try to destroy it before it gets to the point. And it's kind of that same type of game theory. And that we're in this situation. And, Mearsheimer's a very smart guy. And the way that he explained it is very eloquent, much better than I could ever do. But it
Hmm.
made me kind of think, like, is it possible like, I don't want to believe that's the world we live in, where we have a zero sum game, that we have to maintain this dominance. But the problem is if just that idea is out there, people believe that, then it makes it a reality. Because that's obviously the mindset of a lot of the U.S. State Department, is
Uh-huh.
that we can't have any other opposing power, because then they might do to us what we're doing to them, and
Uh-huh.
we have to make sure
Yeah.
that we
Well, I
stay
think
on top.
that's part of the psychology of a hegemon. Is he insisting on maintaining power? Then you feel like, we've made we're on top and we're holding on to it, and we've made a lot of enemies in the process. Now we can't let go. I think it's similar to, Israel as a regional hegemon. It has very much the same kind of psychology. They have treated their rivals with such cruelty that at this point it's like, there's no way we can reverse course and accept some sort of peaceful coexistence, right? If we let go, then they're gonna jump on us. It's gonna be so we have to keep them down, right? I think there is that psychology. It doesn't have to exist. I mean, not every government has that. And again, we did have a Cold War. There wasn't a single hegemon. There was a real rivalry, which was dangerous. But we did accept that there was, a roughly equal military power, and we behaved accordingly with respect and caution, with prudence. And we did succeed in actually reducing tensions and making these treaties that that made the world a much safer place. I mean, there's nothing inevitable about conflict. Well, there's conflict, rivalry, but there's nothing inevitable about war. There are ways to avoid it. Um,
But not if people have that mindset. That's the
yeah,
problem.
that's the problem, right? It's just that we refuse to, like in the case of Russia now, is to actually refuse to consider their security needs. And it's because of that that we're in this war right now. You know, they made it crystal clear, you know, starting going back much earlier, 2008 and earlier, and say, look, Ukraine is really serious to us. And again, we had Bill Burns with this famous, memo that was leaked by WikiLeaks, saying "niet" means "niet." Okay, they're really, really serious about it. We knew that they were very serious about it. We just decided we can't ignore them because we're the hegemon. And if we do accept that they have their own security needs, and that means like giving up some of our hegemonic power, and we can't do it. And that's a new mindset that we have that we didn't used to have. You know, we used to accept that there could be a rival. Now we just can't accept it. And that is very dangerous. That's what's creating these real risks and this escalation that we see now in Ukraine.
Right. And the problem is that once you adopt that mindset, the further you go along with that mindset and the policies that it brings, then the deeper the hole you dig, because you're like we said with Israel, it's like once you're in too deep, you can't stop, right? Because then there's too much blood on your hands. If you don't see it through, then all of a sudden you're going to have retribution, pointed right at you. And that's what I'm afraid of, is that if we keep on going too far, luckily, it seems like Putin has been rather patient with us and understands this and is allowing the kind of to continue without saying that we're going to just go wreak havoc on you, even though there is pressure from people like Medvedev and or whatever in Russia that are saying like, look, the U.S. has gone too far. We got to go. You know, we're at war with NATO. These guys are insane. You know, and I can see that position, and hopefully we can step back. But if we keep on going further and further, that Medvedev contingent in Russia is going to go stronger and stronger, and then it's going to be too late. Then we can't. We may not be able to turn the ship around. That's what I'm worried about. That this mindset is going to take us too far to the point of no return.
Yeah. Well, that's a risk, and again, it shows that the realists haven't disappeared entirely. I mean, just the fact you heard a realist speaking when Lloyd Austin said, "Look, it just doesn't make sense. They've already moved their air assets. That's just." So the realists are there; they haven't disappeared, and we can just hope that they win the day. But the hegemons, the hegemonic, mindset, as you describe it, is clearly there and hasn't died, and it's going to, it looks like it's just going to take us to the brink. I just hope it doesn't take us over the brink.
Yeah. Is it also possible that we're just getting too focused in tunnel vision on these conflicts and the weeds and the potential dangers that they bring, that maybe we were overplaying it, that it's really, things aren't as serious as there, because I was just I was at my son's 2-year-old soccer practice, and I was talking to another dad there, and he's like, "Oh, we just had a hurricane." I'm like, "Oh, well, the apocalypse option B or A here or B here. We got Ukraine, Russia," and I just realized that I'm in a completely different world than everybody else, and I had to stop myself talking about these things because he's just asking about what I've been into or talking about. I'm like, he was like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Am I?"
Right. No. You're right. Most people just aren't really aware of it, but it is real. I mean, it's just like there's nothing here that we're talking about that's not real. These risks are real, and it's gonna come home to bite all of us. I mean, like the dad at the soccer field, he's gonna feel it too at some point. I mean, you could say maybe he's actually just more practical and than we are. Say there's not a whole lot we can do about this, but what we're observing is real. It's like we got a pair of binoculars and we can see these things that are happening, right at their horizon there, and they're terrifying. It's not like we're making any of this stuff up, but a lot of people just go on with their lives, if and in a way you can't blame him. How much work it is being a dad and a husband, and
Mm.
so they focus on that. It's just in the end, it's going to affect all of us. I think and in a very big way. It just can't. That's going to end in places like the U.S. has actually been much more insulated than other parts of the world, but Europe is already being severely affected by this. This war has had a huge impact on the European economy, and not in a good way. There was recently Draghi came out, with his report and say, yeah, Europe is basically screwed, and he admitted that a lot of the problem was extraordinarily high energy prices, but he just wouldn't actually talk
Doesn't
about
admit
yeah,
why there's high prices.
It's just like it's just something that happened, but it was obviously decisions not that the Russians took, but that the Europeans themselves took.
Well,
The
and the
European
U.S.
establishment.
I mean, the U.S.
Yeah,
blew up the Nord
yeah,
Stream.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, the West in general. So anyway, it's already affecting people in Europe, and some Europeans are obviously waking up to this. So you do not quite a few. I mean, we're not talking about a tiny minority. Um, they feel they know what's happening. So that's why in Germany and in France, and other European countries, you're getting some actually a real growth in the parties that oppose the Ukraine war. They understand that it's been very harmful to Europe. They know that this is real, this matters, and it's actually threatening the future of Europe. Now the U.S. has just been, we're off by ourselves, and we generally just don't feel the consequences of our foreign policy mistakes here. We do really stupid things, but it's just like it's always on the other side of the ocean, and we don't do it. But if I think this is big enough that we just will not be able to escape the consequences. It's just like Boris Johnson said, that Western hegemony is really on the line here. I mean, that it's if the Russians deal or inflict an obvious defeat on NATO here, it's going to have repercussions around the world. Of course, it already has, but it's going to have repercussions that the dad at the soccer field is going to experience.
what kind of repercussions? I
Well,
mean, hopefully
eventually,
we're not all vaporized.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the worst
Well, okay.
repercussion.
There is a possibility, a threat of nuclear war. I hope, of course, that we don't, you know, fall into that abyss. But it's there. I mean, it's just that these people have become very reckless, and they're pushing they are coming up to the brink. Okay, there's that. But then there's also just the blow to U.S. prestige is inevitably is going to. I think people don't realize the extent to which our prosperity depends on the prestige of the U.S. and in particular the confidence that's placed in the U.S. financial system and in the dollar in particular. And so I think that's probably most likely the way it would play out. It's just that that's already being eaten away, eroded, by U.S. actions over the last few years. And some U.S. politicians, including Trump, has come up and said this, like, we're in danger of becoming a third world nation. And it's just like, the U.S. dollars. Now, his solution, I think, would only make things worse. It's like to penalize anybody who stops using the dollar or something. That's just going to drive
That's
more.
why you got to get rid of the dollar.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like it's
Exactly.
not
People
fair.
look at that and say that, look,
Oh.
right. But that's, yeah. So it's not just us. In domestic politics, there is some talk about this. There is some awareness of this, and. I think most likely, that's how we're going to, see the effects that are going to are going to have a clear impact on the average citizen, the one that hasn't taken an interest in foreign affairs or anything. In the end, it's just to a great extent his prosperity is dependent on the goodwill towards the United States, and that goodwill is evaporating. Okay,
Scary times. Okay. Thanks a lot, Dad. Have a good rest of your day.
thank you.